Welcome back to our library studio. I'm your host, Craig Winn. This is the YAHOWah blog. We have been doing an ongoing series. I think this is episode 31, if I'm not mistaken, of this program. It is October 30th. It's a Thursday here in the fall of 2025. We're just 8 years now away from YAHOWah and Dowd's return in 2033. And only about 7 months away from the beginning of the time of Israel's troubles. And we are doing a series where we're examining what can be learned about the great betrayer of Israel and the world. There is an enormous amount of prophecy regarding an individual that will arise in the last days who will betray Israel. He is best noted both in Daniel 9 and also in Isaiah 17, for narrowing Israel at the waist and confirming a treaty with many that makes God's people vulnerable. It is addressing the creation of a fake Palestinian state, the so-called two-state solution that will be imposed on Israel. And according to Yashayah, Isaiah, this occurs during or prior to, right around, if you will, the fulfillment of Shabu'wah, 7 years before the return of YAHOWah and Dowd at the commencement of the time of Israel's troubles. And therefore, it will occur. There will be a fake Palestinian state acknowledged and set prior to the 22nd of May, 2026. And in the 18th chapter of Yashayah, the prophet uses some 70 different adjectives to describe the perpetrator, describing him individually and his nation. And all of those signs point to a single individual and single country, Donald Trump and the United States of America. And these terms are not the least bit ubiquitous in the sense of applying to many different people. They're very specific to the nature of the United States, how it operates in the world, the size of its military, particularly its drones and helicopters and the like, and its projection of its power and strength through its navy and its aircraft battle groups, and the fact that it menaces the world, projecting its influence all over the world, and does so in a way that is egotistical and duplicitous, exceedingly manipulative and controlling. And the prophet indicates that this individual has enormous influence over Israel, and because of Netanyahu's failed plans in Gaza, Israel now has become a vassal of Donald J. Trump. So clearly this is the individual we're talking about. Then in Yashayah 14, and the prophet's analysis and portrayal of Satan, he describes the type that Satan will choose to project his influence on in the last days. This person will be demon-possessed by Satan himself. We have two examples of this previously, and men of considerable infamy, one being Paul, the author of the first 14 books of the Christian New Testament. In his second letter to the Corinthians, he overtly affirms that he was demon-possessed to control his gargantuan ego. And Muhammad later would also claim twice to be demon-possessed, and he wrote entire surahs. He didn't write, but he was illiterate, but he proclaimed entire surahs on behalf of Satan and the jinn, the demons. And so these are the prototypes. And so as we read in Yashayah, Isaiah 14, we're told that this individual will be duplicitous. He will traffic in lies. And we've never seen that to the extent that we are witnessing now with Donald Trump. That he will be exceedingly egotistical, again, never to the extent witnessed previously prior to Donald Trump, that he will be sexually perverted. Again, way beyond what we'd normally expect in a world leader with Donald Trump. Then we have some attributes that we can add to that are presented in the book of Daniel. And to that, we're told that he is a very old man. Long in days is the term that is used on 2 different occasions. That he has goatish comb-over hair, which would be also Donald Trump. That ultimately he's going to be wheelchair-bound because his legs will give out. Probably that injury that caused him to get the deferments so many times for the Vietnam War. Either that or his cankles. And then we are told that he will be a man that likes to surround himself with other world leaders and will become not only manipulative of them as they support his agenda, as we've just witnessed in the Peace 25 initiative, of where all of these individuals were likely in attendance, but also that he will turn in Trumpian fashion on 3 of them. There is no one that devours even his allies to the extent that Donald Trump does. And we're reminded that this individual will be sexually perverted, and that the person known as the Antichrist, there is no Christ, so he's not the Antichrist, but this great betrayer of Israel, Satan incarnate, is, again, we're told he's going to be egotistical and disingenuous, and exceedingly power hungry, and that he is going to go after God himself, going to pronounce that he is a God, and that he is going to renounce the 7 of Yahowah's Mowed Miqra'ey, perpetrating a great crime against the means that God has provided to save his people. And so this is the individual, this is the time. So we are absolutely in the 7 months that begins this timeline, the last 7 months leading up to it. And there is no question that this is precisely what is going to occur, and that we have correctly fingered Donald Trump as that individual. And when you look at his mannerisms, his actions, his words, his deeds, there's just no question. Every time we look at a new post, you say, yep, there's the Antichrist. Satan has a type, and clearly Donald Trump is it. So as we were doing this, we're now concluding our review of the 9th chapter. It is spoken by one of the greatest, not one of, the single greatest man who ever lived. It is being presented by Gabry'el, who was introduced as a man. He is not an angel, much less an archangel. He is presenting this as God's most capable and courageous man, the Gabry'el, which would make him David. So he went on to say, therefore, know, be aware of Yada, be cognizant of and recognize that the gain in the insights to understand, realizing that the best option is for you to be prudent after learning, being circumspect, such that you know that from the going forth of the word to restore the rebuilding of Jerusalem until the restoring testimony of the eternal witness, of the Son of the Sovereign, who is conspicuously making this known, and who is providing the leadership and counsel, Neged, of the one who has officially obtained the status of being properly appointed, and who has expounded upon and announced, even proclaimed, the message of the Mashyach, of the anointed Messiah, that there are 7 sevens, and thus 7 promises and fulfilled vows. Therefore, in 62 weeks, she will be restored and rebuilt to establish and fortify the way to grow and to expand, Rakob, opening the way by expanding where people can congregate from Rakab to grow larger, by being diligent and decisive, by being sharper, by being determined, increasingly judgmental in a time of oppression, a period of astonishing subjugation, restrictions, constraints, and persecution. Daniel 9:25. And after the 62 weeks, the anointed Messiah will be cut off and separated to create the covenant, being banished, but not for himself. That's 9:26 in part. So let's look at some of these words, and then we'll move forward in the text and begin to analyze it. So therefore, Yada. Yada is the name of Dowd's herald. It's a verb in Hebrew. It means to know, to be aware of, to be cognizant of, to process the information required to understand. But it is also the name de plume of the fellow that wrote Yada Yahowah, means to know Yahowah. And it is used throughout the Torah and prophets to acknowledge this individual. And so when it begins with a Yada, you know that Dowd is trying to direct our attention to the person who will, at long last, present this all accurately to you. And so after no, he is saying that you're going to have to be shakal if you're going to follow along. That means you're going to have to be able to process the insights necessary to understand. And this will be the first time for almost all of you that that is even possible, because it is being presented now in a way that you can be prudent and prosper based upon what is being revealed. Then it says, from the going forth of the word, Matsah dabar, the stage being set to begin the process in accord with the message, to return and restore. Shub. Shub is the key term as it relates to all things related to Yahweh and the chosen people. God made it quite clear throughout the Torah and prophets, but particularly in the book of Hosea, that he was leaving Israel. There is no godly interference or involvement at this time with Israel. Well, you can tell that. Look at the Haredim marching in the streets of Jerusalem as a massive mob of parasites. And on the other side, you have the Marxists who are tearing Israel apart at the other side of the spectrum. It's a house divided that there isn't one in a million Israelites that actually knows Yahweh at this time. And Yahweh said, you've been religious so long, you're so revolting in your religiosity that I'm just leaving you. Here's your letter of divorce, and I'm not returning to you until you return to me. As I like to say, a shub for shub, or no shub for you. This was shub. So to return and restore, rebuilding Jerusalem. Jerusalem means the source of teaching and guidance on reconciliation, until the restoring testimony and the eternal witness. Ad speaks of those last two individuals, of Yada and of Elia, who will strive to awaken this final remnant of Yisrael, calling them back home. It means to restore, to provide testimony, for that testimony to be everlasting, and to act in the role of a witness. Then the next word is used twice in this same statement. It is obviously used in a very positive sense in association with the Messiah in its first occasion, and then very negatively in the second. It's as if the two mentions of neged are literally being opposed to one another, with the initial neged representing the Mashyach, David, who was making this statement, and the second neged representing Satan, that is trying to undo all that God wants to accomplish in these last days. So this neged is being referred to as the Son of the Sovereign. So he is an eternal witness on behalf of. So he is not the Son of the Sovereign. The Son of the Sovereign would be the firstborn son of Yahweh, who is the Bikuwrym, and Yahweh was quite clear, his firstborn son is David. So this person is providing restoring testimony and an eternal witness on behalf of the Son of the Sovereign. And he is making him conspicuously known and is providing leadership and counsel in this regard. And in this regard, Yada, as the odd restoring witness, is the first person in all of human history to deduce correctly that Dowd David, the person speaking here is Gabry'el, is the Son of God. He is the Messiah. He is the chosen one. He is the exemplar of the covenant. He is the most set apart. He is our Yasha, Savior. He is our returning King. No one previously had been able to deduce all of these conclusions. And so Naged here, speaking of the one who as a restoring witness will address the nature of the Son of the Sovereign, making him conspicuously known as the Mashyach, the anointed Messiah. We are dealing with that same individual, Yada, that began this testimony. There's only one person ever who has been able to do these things. And so Dowd is actually speaking of him, because until you recognize who he is relative to who Dowd is, then you're really not in a position to capitalize upon what Dowd has done, because he's the only person that has actually understood it and explained it in a way that you can capitalize upon it. Now we get down to the math of it. There are 7 sevens and thus 7 promises and fulfilled vows. Shabu'wah, which is the plural of Shabu'wah, which is the next harvest. Shiba'ah, contractual oaths fulfilled in harmony with the promise of Shabu'wah over 7 periods of 7 weeks. Yahweh's math always works out the same. 6 plus 1 equals 7. Man, who was conceived on the 6th day, a carbon-based life form with the atomic number of 6, plus God, who is 1, Yahweh is 1, equals God's idea of perfection, of us coming together. It is why this 6, Mow'ed, Miqra'ey, Pesach, Matsah, Bikuwrym, Shabu'wah, Towrah, and Kippurym, lead to the 7th, which is Sukah, where we return to the conditions experienced in Eden and camp out together with God in great joy. Therefore, in 62 weeks, we have 7 sevens plus 7 promises. Therefore, in 62 weeks, she will be restored and rebuilt to establish and fortify. We will go through the math of that in a moment. The way to grow and expand, Rakab. This is not big, wide streets. This is the whole purpose of what Dowd has accomplished by fulfilling Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. He adds to our days, opening the doorway to life on Pesach. He carries our guilt away on Matsah so that we can enter God's home and be seen as perfect in God's eyes, so that on Bikuwrym we can be enriched and empowered, enabled, so that we grow and expand, becoming more than we would otherwise be. Bikuwrym is a tenfold expansion in our capabilities. And actually Shabu'wah, which is mentioned here, is a double dose of another tenfold. So it's a magnitude of 10 plus twice a magnitude of 10 in this process. And all of this is on behalf of those who are diligent and decisive in a time of oppression, in a time of anguishing subjugation. And then after the 62 weeks, the anointed Mashyach, the Messiah, which is what Yahweh refers to Dowd. Dowd is the only person that Yahweh refers to 3 times to say that he is my Messiah. He is the one I want anointed as the Messiah. And he's always mentioned by name. And he is going to be Karath, which is from Karat, means to be cut off and separated to create a covenant, and therefore will be banished at that moment, but not for himself. Daniel 9:26 in part. So Gabry'el, God's most capable and confident, courageous and combative man, preferenced this prophecy with Yada and Shakal. That is to say, by prudently processing this information, we will gain the insights needed to understand. Clearly, this is a thinking man's prophecy. Now, when he is speaking, as is the case, of course, with Eliah, who was another thinking man's prophet, Yashayah is a wonderful example, particularly with his robust vocabulary. We have to engage our brains if we're going to keep pace with them. So when he repeatedly indicates this if we want to figure this out, of course, we're going to need to be discerning. We have to learn by processing the information which Gabry'el, Dowd, is providing in an intelligent manner. And experience dictates that we follow his advice if we want to benefit from any of this, because heretofore it has never been understood or properly explained. So in other words, we should consider how to process the pieces of this puzzle that have been provided and how they fit together, as opposed to, say, doing what Christians have done, to pluck the Mashyach reference out of context to promote an agenda that is contrary to everything else that has been said in this revelation. To be on the same page with the Messiah, we should linger on this page with him. Now, he is explaining that there will be a public decree issued regarding the liberation of Yehudim Jews from Babel, which is the place where truth and lies are commingled to confuse. It means with the Lord, which is therefore in association with Satan, and it is the basis of the word that Christians use to describe their Bible. Babel and Bible written the same way. Therefore, it is worth considering the similarity between this and the decree to leave Miqra'ey, the crucibles of religious and political oppression, during Pesach to begin the Exodus. And actually, they left during Matsah. Pesach was the doorway to life, and then Matsah was the opportunity to walk out that door. This is because Yahowah introduced Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym, and even then later Shabu'wah, to physically liberate and educate the children of Yisrael from religious and political oppression. The process would continue with Yahowah explaining the Miqra'ey to Moshe within the Torah guidance that he revealed, which was likely received, at least the first installment, on Shabu'wah. Now, this ultimately led to God's people entering the promised land, albeit 40 years thereafter. The proclamation Dowd is currently addressing is similar. This time, Yehudim will be liberated from religious and political subjugation in Babel, the birthplace of the beast, this commingling of religion and politics, which would evolve from Babylon to Persia to Greece through imperial Rome to the Roman Catholic Church. Not only would they be physically freed, Yehudim would be able to rebuild Jerusalem, the source of guidance on reconciliation, which of course is the city of Dowd. Now, after the passage of the specified time, Dowd's nefesh soul would return to his city, all to serve his people by fulfilling Pesach and Matsah, leading to Bikuwrym. Then the promise of enrichment and empowerment was honored as a result. In so doing, the nefesh souls of covenant members could be allowed to come home during Shabu'wah, which is the upcoming harvest, to become exempt from the tyranny of politics and religion that are currently and have been for a very long time plaguing the planet. So nearly 40 Yobel, there's that number again, thereafter, we would be using Shabu'wah and Towrah to call the covenant family out of religion and politics back to Yahowah, back to the promised land, to their Messiah, and to God. This will culminate with the grand reunion taking place upon Dowd's return on Kippurym, which leads to Sukah camping out with our Father and his family forevermore. So in this way, with the proclamation to leave Babylon, and restore Jerusalem, the source of guidance on reconciliations, one event foreshadows the next, becoming a harbinger of what follows. Each step liberating us from religious influence and from political control, so that we can come home and be family. Now, in conjunction with the redemption of his people, the Neged, the son of the sovereign, by Neged publicly revealing what would occur, explaining how it would transpire, and then demonstrating the character and courage to bring this to fruition, is the one who is providing leadership and counsel regarding Mashyach, the Messiah. He is fulfilling his vows to our Heavenly Father over the course of explaining the 7 Mow'ed. Now, while the Messiah Dowd is the son of the sovereign in the sense of Yahowah, it is also true that Yada is representative of the sovereign. He is the lesser light reflecting the greater light's luminosity. He is the king's herald. And because it is King Dowd, this is conspicuously making, and he is conspicuously making the identity of our Messiah known. We go right back to Yada. He is tasked with the responsibility of doing what no one has previously done, explaining all of this, including Dowd's role as the Messiah, including Dowd's role in this particular prophecy, including the fact that it is Dowd that is delivering the prophecy, none of which anybody knew previously. It explains why this Neged is named in the midst of it, so that what I'm sharing can be widely known. Now, recognizing that Dowd's gruesome and heroic portrayal of his soul's fulfillment of Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym in 2033 CE, as he depicted and described it 1,000 years in advance in the 22nd Mizmor, replete with explaining how he would endure crucifixion and how crucifixion kills, centuries before crucifixion was even existed, then we are drawn to this proclamation with a very serious mindset. It's describing one of the most cathartic things ever endured. So then after 62 weeks, the anointed Messiah will be cut off and separated, but not for himself. That's what he said of himself. This self-portrait is awe-inspiring. It's courageous. It's compassionate. It's hard to properly convey the enormity of what he is saying here. Of course, we're overwhelmed by what he had volunteered to endure crucifixion, and then have his soul go into hell to liberate us from our sin and our guilt. It's amazing what he accomplished, or that he had the fervor to do so. We're also horrified by what the religious have done to cheat our Messiah and us out of the magnitude of this gift. Now, I'm not immune to criticism either. Over the past 24 years, I've struggled with this passage, Daniel 25 and 26, more than probably anything in the Tanakh. And now I know that it is only from the perspective of Dowd, revealing what he would achieve, that these words ring true. And yet, as the first and only one to ascertain this profoundly important realization regarding Dowd, what it says is that the very passage that's used to create the illusion of Jesus Christ actually destroys it and tells us that it's Dowd David who was the one crucified, fulfilling Passover in 33 CE. Heretofore, that's been unknown. And yet is this most profoundly important realization from the Torah and Nabiim that has ever been made. The only prophetic statements which rival this in their challenge to translate, I would suspect, are 2 Samuel 7 and Yashayah 9, both of which we have considered and we will reconsider many more times throughout this blog. It was the first of these, reading Yahweh's response to Dowd wanting to build a home for him, that we finally were able to resolve the identity of the son and the king, both Dowd. And all that was required for it to be consistent with the whole of God's story was to understand the challenge and audience, who was being addressed. From God speaking to Dowd through Nathan, to God speaking of him to us, and then back to speaking directly to his son. The identity of the son in Yashayah 9 also lays in the recognition that there's only one name that was given to identify him, just as there is only one person to whom all of these accolades are applicable, Dowd, which has been corrupted to David. So in the preamble to this prophecy, Gabry'el, God's most capable and courageous man, listed many things which would be resolved as a result of what he would accomplish, some of which were achieved during Chag Matsah, while most are going to be fulfilled on Towrah prior to Dowd's Yom Kippurym return. They are listed together because they will be accomplished on behalf of and through the same Messiah. And speaking of Mashyach, if not Dowd, how would a new one have been anointed such that we could have learned of him? Dowd had clearly stated that this would bring an end to prophecy. There would be no one for Yahweh to work with or to speak through at a later time. And since we know the timing of the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, and we have done the math, we know that the Messiah's fulfillment of Chag Matsah occurred in the Yobel year of 4000 Yah, which is 33 CE, in absolute harmony with the Torah's instructions. And since Mashyach's Bashar body was karat, cut down, and died on Passover, and then was karath, separated on unyeasted bread, a Shabat, with the firstborn released and returned to the father on the invitation of firstborn children, the individual receiving the Torah's promises could have been none other than Dowd, and it could not have been the founder of a Torah adverse religion, as in Jesus Christ. That would have been stunningly absurd when you consider all of these connections. So Dowd knew that something special was going to occur in his city, Jerusalem, the source of guidance regarding reconciliation in 7 plus 62 years, weeks of years, I should say, from the pronouncement to return. Not only because he was a prophet, but also because, well, he would play the starring role during it. Now, we have been given, of course, the starting point. One we'll track down in a moment, pertaining to the announcement to return and restore Jerusalem by the man who built Jerusalem into the city of David 3,000 years ago. He was the most prolific source of restoring testimony found anywhere in Yahweh's eternal witness. Moreover, Dowd is the most conspicuous of Israel's leaders and the most profuse of counselors. He is also the preeminent Mashyach, having been anointed 3 times on Yahweh's instruction, something that never happened again. So once again, the timing, if we are to read it as such, is predicated upon Shabu'wah, Shiba'ah, 7 promises and contractual vows fulfilled in harmony with Shabu'wah over 7 periods of 7 weeks. Well, Dowd will soon return to fulfill Kippurym and then serve as the king of Sukah. The Son of God embodies Bikuwrym, and it is firstborn children which makes Shabu'wah possible. He is Yahweh's Bikuwrym, his firstborn, the foremost beneficiary of Shabu'wah, the promise of 7. Yahweh has overtly empowered, enriched, enlightened, and enabled Dowd to accomplish these great things. Now, once home, the result would have nothing to do, of course, with what is presented in religious translations. God didn't care about the buildings. There were no wide plazas. There were no broad avenues. The defensive walls or moats, as they describe, did not happen, as these translations claim. So when we turn, which we do quite often, to the actionable root of the words that Dowd selected, we discover what was actually going to be shub, restored, and bana, established. And that was rakob, the way to grow and to expand by charutz, being diligent and decisive. What is being foretold is the fulfillment of the first three Miqra'ey in year 4000 Yah, because they provide the benefits of the covenant, the means to grow and expand, to become more capable and to be fully empowered by God. And this applies to those who are diligent and decisive regarding the terms of acceptance. We also learn that this will occur bashok ha'etz, in a troubling time of oppression and anguishing subjugation, restrictions, and constraints. Dowd is speaking of Yahudim being persecuted and harassed by imperial Rome and then pushed into a corner and confined by her church. This isn't of rabbis acting badly. They would be less influential at this time than any other. The whole Christian legend that the Jews had schemed to crucify their man God and then crucified him is just absurd. And the prophecy doesn't speak of that. Now, since I'm anxious to reprise the math and verify the result, let's interrupt the conclusion of this prophecy to do the arithmetic. We'll do it now. We'll reconstruct with Gabry'el thereafter, reconnect, I should say, with him, with Dowd thereafter, and consider all that he has to share, because there's a lot more to this. Well, after all, Dowd knew what was going to happen to himself and to his people, and he warned us about it. The least we can do is to listen and contemplate all he had to say. But now it's time to fill in some of the gaps. At first, among these gaps to be filled in is to return to the math itself. In this regard, it is helpful to know that a prophetic year isn't equivalent to a solar year. And solar years really didn't exist back in the day. Entirely different calendars, and we've got to put ourselves in that mindset. And so to ascertain the number of days in 62 weeks of years, we should adjust our measurements to Yah's prophetic process. This consists of 12 months of 30 days based upon a sensible rounding up to the nearest full integer of the 29.5 of a lunar cycle. Not the 365.242, which are now blazoned into what became the Roman method and then that of Roman Catholicism, and the current calendar with its leap day every 4 years. This duration of time also differed from the Babylonian approach, because they observed a lunisolar year, which added an intercalary month every 5 to 6 years to prevent the shifting of seasons. They were aware of the solar year as 365.25 days long, but the lunar calendar remained the only practical timekeeping device before mass communication and mechanics. A lunisolar year gave everyone a reliable means to set their clocks, no matter where they were, anywhere around the known world. Every renewed moon marked the start of a new month. The Israelites, based upon Yahweh's Torah instruction, used a different method, although it had a very similar result. The intercalary month was added based upon barley, the first grain to rise in the spring. Fruit harvested in the suburbs of Jerusalem, was tested as they approached the nearest renewed moon to what was the vernal equinox. If the grain was still green and growing, still laden with water, it would dance in a hot pan placed above an open fire. In that case, the next renewing moon would designate the beginning of a new year. However, as effective as this actually turns out to be year to year, it is not a predictive approach, since it only pertains to the beginning of the current year. Therefore, since this was not predictive of future years or great expansive years, and thus not suitable for prophecy, it would lead to confusion over centuries of time. The barley method does not offer a means to distinguish one year from the next in advance of the current situation. And that is what makes the length of a prophetic year, 360 days, the one which was established in Bereshith, Genesis, where events related to the flood are given in both days and years. Now, these things known, the date of the word coming forth to restore and build Jerusalem is actually presented in Nehemiah, where we read, "And it came to pass in the month of Nisan," that would be Abib. That's the Babylonian version of the word, but it is Abib and Nisan occur at the same time. "In the 20th year of Artaxerxes, when I," that would be Nehemiah, "said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Yehudah, to the city of my father's tombs, where I might rebuild it. So it pleased the king to send me." Nehemiah 2, 1 through 6. Now, in ascertaining this date, it's helpful to know that archaeologists have discovered and translated thousands of cuneiform tablets from the ruins of Babylon. By doing so, we have come to learn that Artaxerxes was not able, actually, to assume the throne until 464 BCE. And that would make the 20th year of his reign, and thus the starting date of Gabry'el's, Dowd's prophecy, and Daniel, the first of Abib, Nisan, 444 BCE. Therefore, from the Abib 1, 444 BCE date, we must add 7 weeks of years, 49 prophetic years, until Jerusalem would be rebuilt. And then there would be another 62 weeks, 434 prophetic years, for a total of 483 prophetic years, until the one miscast by the Romans, but yet authorized by God, would fulfill Pesach. Now, to calculate his arrival, we should multiply 483, which is 49 plus 434 years, by the 360 days in the Torah's prophetic year. This equals, you do the math, 173,880 days. There'll be a test on this at the end of this program, so you might want to write down your notes. So 173,880 days. Rich is over there squirming. He says, "Oh, he's not going to ask me a question, is he?" I'm hiding behind this wall of monitors now.
You can't see me. I'm not here.
Okay. So, and to make that a little simpler, 173,880 days is 476 solar years, plus an additional 21 days. When we divide that by 365.25, which gives us the length of a solar year, which we should then add to our starting date, which is Nisan 1 and 444 BCE, 20 years after Artaxerxes secured the throne. Now, it bears repeating. The solar lunar calendar, based upon, used, I should say, really at the time of the Hebrews and Babylonians, featured a 364-day year with an addition of a 29.5 days for an additional lunar month 7 out of 19 years is the Babylonian method. There would be no Julian calendar at the time, and the concept of a leap day to properly adjust the solar lunar calendar wouldn't be conceived until halfway through that period. So God's going to communicate through Dowd timing. He can't use a calendar that has not yet been invented and wouldn't be invented for a very long time. So that is to say that Dowd's intent with the prophecy was to get the thoughtful reader to realize that when he adds 476 years from Nisan in 444 BCE, drum roll please, we arrive in Abib in 33 CE, which is the Yobel year of 4,000 Yah. Mission accomplished. But there's more. What this means, at least when transferred from the Julian calendar, is that his fulfillment of Chag Matsah was foretold to transpire in April 33 CE. Now, to get this, you have to recognize that there was no year 0 in the Julian or the Gregorian calendar. They just simply went from 1 BCE to 1 CE without the year 0. So rather than that being a 2-year span on the calendars that we are now using, there is a 0-year span between the 1-year span versus a 2-year span between them, because there's no year 0. So you need to add the recognition that there's a missing year there when going from BCE to CE. Now, affirming that we're in the right place and time, there is no question that 33 CE is the ideal outcome. And we know this because we can go back using the Torah's genealogy, something that Maimonides didn't do. Obviously, he didn't like the Torah very much. He much preferred his Mishnah Torah, his own version of it. But in the Torah, we're given dates. And if we use those dates, we know that there were 40 Yobel. Yobel year is every 7 times 7 plus 1, 50-year period where all debts are forgiven, where all slaves are freed, and people return to the land, which is symbolic of everything Yahweh was trying to accomplish here. And there were 40 Yobel, 40 of these, 2,000 years between the time that Adam and Chawah were booted out of the garden till the time that Abraham and Yitzhak climbed Mount Moriah to establish the narrative that would allow us back in, which was in 1968 BCE. That would be year 2000 Yah. And then it was exactly 40 Yobel from 1968 BCE, which is 2,000 years, until Dowd actually fulfilled the promise that was explained in 1968 with Abraham and Yitzhak serving as the dress rehearsal in the exact same place, exactly 2,000 years later, for Dowd on Mount Moriah to fulfill Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym. And 2,000 years from 968 BCE is 33 CE. So it is the ideal outcome. It takes us right to the year that it would have to be to fit God's timing. So we don't have to address, we don't have to have the access, if you will, to the barley fields that year. We can deduce the same result because we can use the vernal equinox. So we're going to really drill down on this because it's truly amazing. Dowd didn't get it right to the year, not to the month, but to the exact day, nearly 500 years in advance. The vernal equinox in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, was on a March 20th. That was a Friday in 33 CE. The nearest emerging lunar crescent to it was conveniently on the same day, March 20th. And that is of great significance. So not only was the vernal equinox on March 20th. And this year, we don't have to guess which new moon it was because the first crescent of the moon was also on March 20th. And the day of the week is a Friday. You don't find that combination of events 100 years either direction of that particular year. And all of those things must be exactly that way for Dowd's depiction to pass muster. It's only 1 year. It could have been the very year that he pointed to. And that 1 year, everything lines up. Now, this means that the Passover meal would have been celebrated on a Thursday evening, the 2nd of April in 33 CE. You still taking your notes there, Rich? We test on all of this, at the end.
It's open book. I'm good.
Okay. I wish it was overbooked. Okay, so the Passover meal would have been celebrated on a Thursday, April 2nd in 33 CE, during the evening beginning at sunset. Dowd's body would then have been crucified as he foretold on Friday, April 3rd. Friday, April 3rd. Then, just prior to sunset, the beginning of the natural and symbolic Shabat of Matsah. His bashar would be removed and incinerated that night. He would have been cut off from the living during Matsah, entering Sheol to carry away our guilt, commencing on a Friday evening and running through Saturday, April 4th at sundown. Dowd's nephesh was laden with our guilt and taken to this black hole to deposit it there, never to be seen again at this very moment. This not only means that firstborn children was observed on the first day of the new week, but also that Chag Matzah would continue through Friday, April 9th, because Chag Matzah is a 7-day celebration, which is, of course, drum roll please, exactly 476 years and 21 days from Abib 1, 444 BCE. Extraordinary, isn't it? So, not only was Gabry'el, Dowd, revealing that his fulfillment of Chag Matzah would occur beginning Thursday, April 2nd, with the Passover meal, and that he would serve as the lamb on Friday, April 3rd, removing our guilt on the Shabbat of April 4th in 33 CE. He reminded all who would do the math that Chag Matzah is a 7-day celebration of our redemption. It is also profoundly important to note that the only way for the forecasted year to be correct is for there to be an observable sliver of emerging light on the moon's surface to reflect this greatness nearest to the vernal equinox, and for that to occur on a Friday, which it does in 33 CE. But to be precise, it must also be co-located with the equinox, which not only occurs in 33 CE, but does not happen again for at least 100 years. Neither occurred in 34, 35, 36, 37, or 38 CE, with only half of the equation met in 39. In fact, going forward in time, there simply isn't another match in which the crescent of a new moon is viewable on the vernal equinox through 100 CE. And going back in time, there is very weak partial match with the observable new moon on Friday in the 26 CE, but it's on the 8th and thus nowhere close to the equinox. We have to go all the way back to 14 CE for another partial match with the visible crescent coterminous with the equinox, but it's on a Tuesday. And that doesn't work for the timing of Pesach, Matsah, and Bikuwrym occurring on a Thursday evening, Friday during the day, all through the Shabat of Saturday, and then concluding on the first day of the week, a Sunday, using today's terminology versus just the numbers. In 6 CE, we find a crescent on Friday and it's only a day from the vernal equinox, but not ideal and still 17 years shy of the result that Dowd forecast. Therefore, this gives us some sense of how unique 33 CE was in this regard. It's the perfect fit in every way. In years, days, correlation to the equinox, at the proper day of the week for all of what Dowd revealed to be a perfect fit. What has been lost on so many is how exquisitely the details of the prophecy match the fulfillment. Dowd's entry into Jerusalem coincided with the day the Paschal lamb would have been brought into the household on the 10th day of Abib, and then just as they had in Hezekiah's time, large crowds would have been gathered in Jerusalem, the source of guidance on reconciliation. This conveniently occurred on a Sunday, the 29th of March in 33 CE, corroborating not only the Palm Sunday recollections of what Dowd did when it was transferred in 52 CE to the mythical Jesus, but also affirming that the Passover supper was observed on a Thursday and that Good Friday is when the crucifixion transpired. I mean, when Paul made up the myth of Jesus, he didn't make it up out of nothingness. What he did is he plagiarized, he performed identity theft. He created a counterfeit of what Dowd had actually done. And there was a recollection of what he did. He just simply placed his lies on top of the truth. Of course, then it was on a Sunday morning that the Messiah returned to his Father. Dowd's prophecy and his subsequent sacrifice corresponded perfectly to the designated time of Passover in year 4000 Yah, Thursday and Friday, April 2nd and 3rd in 33 CE. It was just before sunset, beginning the 14th day of Abib, that all of this transpired, with mission accomplished on the 9th of April, at the completion of Chag Matzah, just as Dowd had foretold. His Bashar and Nefesh, body and soul, served as promised. The prophecy of the first Miqra'ey, invitations to be called out and meet, of Pesach, Passover, Matzah, unyeasted bread, and Bikuwrym, firstborn children, were honored literally right down to the minute detail. There would have been no mistaking what had been done, at least for those who darash, consistently seek to know Yahweh, who read the Torah and found the way to Father and Son, who pondered the implications of the relationship he intended by diligently studying the prophets. Showing our appreciation for what Father and Son have achieved, we should answer God's invitations, and we should observe Chag Matzah, keeping this appointment with Yahweh. The 14th through 21st days of Abib are not difficult to establish. Passover is marked by the first full moon closest to the spring equinox. We should observe Chag Matzah, the celebration of unyeasted bread, by seeking to understand the intent of Yahweh's instructions, doing as much of what the Torah teaches as possible, as they serve as symbols to enlighten our minds. This Chag feast should be celebrated with Yisrael and the covenant family in mind. The menu is roasted lamb and unyeasted bread with olive oil and bitter herbs consistent with that of the first celebrants. While we are reminiscing over the promise of life eternal, we should focus on what occurred during the first Passover, when lives were extended. Matsah, when God's people left the realm of religious and political corruption. On Bikuwrym, when they burst out of the sea as newborn children. Yahweh presents his story in Shemot, names, Exodus 12 and 13. I would also encourage covenant members to Kara to read the prophecies in Yashayah, Isaiah 53, and Mizmor Psalms 22 and 88, all of which are translated for your benefit within the volumes of Yada Yahowah and free at yadayah.com. They speak, for example, here's one, all free at yadayah.com. They speak vividly of Father and Son's intent and the provisions for their people, Yisrael, and for Yahweh's Beryth family. Now, before we leave this profoundly important revelation from Gabry'el, Dowd, regarding when he fulfilled Chag Matzah in year 4000 Yah, which began on Thursday, Friday, April 2nd and 3rd in 33 CE, with the mission accomplished by the 9th of April, 476 years and 21 days from the vernal equinox in 444 BCE. There's another aspect of this which is even more important for us to acknowledge. With Dowd having affirmed the fulfillment of the spring Mow'ed in 33 CE, we can be absolutely certain that the fall Miqra'ey will be fulfilled in 2033, year 6000 Yah, because it is 40 Yobel separated. That is how I know. I know the exact date for Towrah, for Kippurym, and for Sukah. For the sacrifice of the red heifer, this Adamah Parah, that purges the remaining remnant of Yisrael, and that final gleaning on Towrah, the 23rd and 24th of September of 2033, a Shabat. And of Dowd's return with Yahweh on the day of reconciliation, Yom Kippurym, October 2nd, 2033, at sunset, 6:22 p.m. And as the entire world is transformed to the conditions experienced in Eden, and all religious and political individuals are expunged from the earth, and the earth is transformed back into the conditions that existed in Eden, on the 7th of October in 2033, we will celebrate Chag Sukah, and we will enter a 1,000-year celebration of life, camping out with our Father here on earth. Therefore, we now can determine the days upon which Towrah, Kippurym, and Sukah will be fulfilled with absolute certainty. And that's a big deal. Huge! It's almost as important as realizing that Dowd, who, as the Messiah and the Son of God, was crucified in Jerusalem on Friday, April 3rd, 33 CE, exactly as he foretold. And therefore, there is no room for an interloping Jesus in God's story. It's a lie. It's Dowd that was crucified in his second of third of three lives. He is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. Now, if this was not enough, realize that this is the only place in the prophets where there is a reference to a Messiah who will come to be cut off, but not for himself. And yet, rather than justifying Christianity, it annuls it. Collectively, there are more vital revelations for our time. There just are none more important than this. Proof that Jesus never existed all while affirming that Dowd, who fulfilled Chag Matsah in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, was the Messiah, Son of God, and Savior. What a marvelous place for us to stop this program. We're going to return in our next program where we address the rest of his prophecy, because it is absolutely riveting as well. Thank you for listening.